Imagine if everything you took so seriously, your success, your failures, your identity were just a game. What if life wasn't a test to win, but a playful dance you've forgotten how to enjoy? Alan Watts believed the secret of happiness lies in remembering that you are both the player and the played, the dreamer and the dream. Once you see the illusion for what it is, you can finally start playing and winning by letting go. Before we start, comment where you're watching from. Subscribe. Tomorrow's story is even crazier. You've been playing for so long, you forgot you were playing. Picture this. Somewhere in a vast cosmic arcade, a player sits hunched over a console, fingers dancing across controls they no longer consciously notice. The screen flickers with images of traffic jams and mortgage payments, of birthday parties and funeral services, of promotions and heartbreaks. The player's eyes are wide, pupils dilated, completely absorbed in the drama unfolding before them. They lean forward when the character on screen faces danger. They hold their breath during moments of suspense. They feel genuine joy when good things happen and real pain when they don't. But here's the thing. They've been playing so intensely, for so many hours, that they've forgotten they're holding a controller at all. They've forgotten there's a screen. They've forgotten there's an arcade around them, with other players lost in their own games, with music playing and lights flashing and the smell of possibility in the air. They think they are the character on the screen. They think the game is reality itself. This is where you find yourself now, isn't it? You wake up each morning and immediately slip into character, checking your phone, planning your day, worrying about your performance in this elaborate simulation we call life. You play your role so convincingly that you've forgotten you're playing a role at all. The mortgage feels real. The deadlines feel urgent. The opinions of others carry weight that seems to come from somewhere beyond the game itself. Alan Watts once suggested that this forgetting is the source of almost all human suffering. Not the game itself. The game is beautiful, intricate, endlessly creative. The suffering comes from taking it so seriously that we lose our sense of play, our lightness, our ability to step back and marvel at the extraordinary complexity of what we've created. We become method actors who can no longer break character, even when the cameras stop rolling. Look around you right now. Notice how everyone else is playing their roles with such convincing intensity. The businessman rushing past on the sidewalk, clutching his briefcase like it contains the secrets of the universe. The mother frantically organizing her children's schedules, as if their future happiness depends entirely on her performance as family manager. The student staying up all night, memorizing facts for a test that will supposedly determine their worth as a human being. None of this is wrong, you understand. The game requires this level of engagement to function properly. But somewhere along the way, we collectively agreed to forget that we designed the rules ourselves. We started believing that the game was playing us, rather than the other way around. We began to take our temporary character costumes as permanent identities, our scripted interactions as the only possible way to relate to one another. The weight you feel on your shoulders, that crushing sense of responsibility, of things being too important to mess up, that's the weight of believing the game is real. It's the exhaustion that comes from trying to win at something you think has ultimate consequences, when in fact, the only real consequence of losing is having to start another round. But you can't lose, because you can't actually die. You can't fail because there's nowhere to fall to. You can't be rejected because there's no outside to be cast into. This doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid, or that your experiences don't matter. The joy you feel when you succeed at something, the love you experience in relationships, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful, these are real within the context of the game. They're the rewards that make playing worthwhile. But they're not the ultimate reality. They're not what you actually are. What you actually are is the player. The one who chose to sit down at this particular console and lose themselves in this particular story. The one who is so skilled at playing that they can forget they're playing. So creative that they can design a character, so convincing that even they believe in it completely. But every now and then, something glitches. You catch a glimpse of the code beneath the surface. You notice the artificial intelligence that's been running your automatic responses. You realize that the voice in your head that's constantly commenting on everything that running narrative that never stops, isn't actually you talking. It's the character's internal monologue, and you're the one listening to it. This is what's happening to you right now, isn't it? You're starting to notice the seams in the simulation, the arbitrary nature of the rules you've been following so religiously, the way everyone seems to be reading from the same script, even though no one remembers learning their lines. You wear a face that isn't your face. You speak in a voice that isn't your voice. You move through the world carrying a name that was given to you before you even knew what a name was for. This collection of features, habits, preferences, and memories that you call yourself, this elaborate construction you've spent decades building and defending, is nothing more than a character costume in the cosmic dress-up game of existence. But oh, what a costume it is! How intricately designed, how perfectly fitted to your particular role in the grand performance. Every scar tells a story, every laugh line records a moment of joy, every nervous habit reveals something about the challenges your character has faced. You've become so skilled at wearing this mask that you've forgotten there's a face underneath it. You've inhabited this character so completely that you can no longer imagine what you might be without it. Think about the last time you looked in a mirror. Really looked. Not just the quick glance to check if your hair was acceptable or if there was something stuck in your teeth. When you truly study that reflection, who is looking back at you? Is it the successful professional, the devoted parent, the struggling artist, the loyal friend? Or is it something else entirely? Something that watches these roles being played out, something that remains constant, while the character changes and grows and adapts to new scenes in the ongoing drama. Alan Watts loved to point out that we are all playing hide-and-seek with ourselves. The cosmic consciousness that is the true nature of everything pretends to be separate individuals, hides so convincingly in each character that it genuinely forgets its own unlimited nature. You are the universe playing at being you, so successfully that you've lost track of your own cosmic identity. You are God in disguise, wearing the mask of limitation so thoroughly that you experience real fear, real loneliness, real uncertainty. This forgetting is not a mistake to be corrected, but a game to be enjoyed. The whole point of hide and seek is the delicious moment of discovery, the surprise of realizing who was hiding behind the tree all along. But we've become such expert hiders that we've lost the ability to seek ourselves. We've become so invested in our character's survival and success that we've forgotten we're immortal players who can never actually be harmed. Your ego, this sense of being a separate self with needs and fears and ambitions, is like a method actor who has become so absorbed in their role that they believe they actually are the character they're portraying. The ego isn't your enemy, it's your greatest creative achievement. It's the masterpiece of self-deception that allows the infinite to experience limitation, the eternal to taste time, the indestructible to feel fragile. But sometimes the mask slips. Sometimes you catch yourself in an unguarded moment and wonder, who is thinking these thoughts? Who is feeling these feelings? Who is this I that seems to be at the center of every experience? In those moments, you're getting close to the cosmic joke that Watts spent his life trying to share. The searcher is what is being sought. The wave is looking for the ocean. The dancer is trying to find the dance. Every morning you put on your costume and step onto the stage, ready to play your part in the ongoing human drama. You check your reflection to make sure you look the part. Practice your lines in the shower. Mentally, rehearse the scenes you'll need to perform that day. And because you're such a dedicated actor, because you care so deeply about the quality of your performance, you forget that when the curtain falls, you get to take off the makeup and go home to who you really are. But what if there is no home to go to because you never left? What if the stage is your home, and the character is your chosen form of play? What if the cosmic joke is that there's nowhere to go because you're already there, nothing to find because you never lost anything, no one to become because you already are everyone? The mask you wear isn't hiding your true face, it is your true face. For now, in this particular game, the character you play isn't separate from who you really are. It's how you've chosen to experience yourself in this round of the endless game of existence. You are both the actor and the role, the painter and the painting, the dreamer and the dream. Deep in your bones, deeper than thought can reach, you carry an ancient terror. It whispers to you in the dark hours before dawn, when the distractions of the day have fallen away and you're left alone with the vast uncertainty of existence. It speaks in the language of what if, painting pictures of loss so vivid that your body responds as if they were already happening. Your heart races at scenarios that exist only in imagination. Your hands shake at the thought of failures that may never come to pass. This is the fear of losing your job, your relationships, your health, your relevance, your time, your life itself. It's the grinding anxiety that maybe you're not doing enough, being enough, achieving enough to justify your place in this vast cosmic drama. It's the persistent worry that you might be discovered as inadequate, that your mask might slip and reveal the frightened child underneath who still doesn't understand the rules of the game everyone else seems to play so effortlessly. You plan and prepare, strategize, building elaborate defenses against imaginary threats. You save money for disasters that may never happen. You practice conversations for conflicts that may never arise. You rehearse explanations for mistakes you haven't made yet. You live in a constant state of readiness for loss, as if your vigilance alone could keep the inevitable at bay. But what if the thing you're trying so desperately to protect was never actually yours to begin with? What if this identity you're fighting to maintain, this life you're struggling to control, this story you're working so hard to perfect, what if none of it was ever really at stake because none of it was ever really separate from the larger game being played? Alan Watts would have laughed at this cosmic comedy, not cruel laughter, but the gentle amusement of someone who has seen through the magnificent illusion. He understood that we are like waves on the ocean, terrified of crashing into the shore, not realizing that we are the ocean itself. The wave cannot lose its wetness any more than you can lose your essential nature. The form changes, the dance continues, but what you truly are remains untouched by the temporary dramas of gain and loss. Consider this: every single thing you've ever lost, relationships that ended, opportunities that passed you by, versions of yourself that you've outgrown, where did they actually go? They became part of the story, part of the rich tapestry of experience that makes your character so complex and interesting. Nothing was ever truly lost, because nothing was ever truly separate. It all just transformed, changed costumes, found new ways to express itself in the ongoing improvisation of existence. The comedian George Carlin once observed that we spend the first half of our lives acquiring things and the second half worrying about losing them. But Watts would add another layer. We spend our entire lives forgetting that we are not the things, not the acquirer, not even the one who loses. We are the awareness in which all of this acquiring and losing appears, the spacious presence that remains constant, whether the character on stage is winning or losing, succeeding or failing, living or dying. Your body will age and eventually stop functioning. Your thoughts will change, your personality will evolve, your circumstances will shift in ways you cannot predict or control. Every single thing you currently identify as yourself is temporary, conditional, subject to the natural cycles of change that govern all phenomena. This isn't cause for despair, it's cause for wonder. You are not a fixed thing trying to preserve itself against entropy. You are the creative force that delights in expressing itself through endless temporary forms. The fear of death, that ultimate loss, reveals itself as the fear of a game ending. But what happens when a game ends? You get up from the table, stretch your muscles, maybe grab a snack, and then sit down to play again. The character dies, but the player is immortal. The wave crashes, but the ocean continues. The dance ends, but the dancer is already preparing for the next song. This doesn't diminish the poignancy of the human experience. If anything, it makes it more precious. Knowing that this particular configuration of consciousness is temporary, that this specific way of being you will never exist again in quite the same way, infuses every moment with a bittersweet beauty. You are not trying to save yourself from change. You are change itself, playing at being something stable enough to worry about preservation. So let yourself feel the fear, but hold it lightly. Let yourself grieve the losses, but remember they are scene changes in an endless play. Let yourself strive and achieve and build and create, But know that the real victory is not in winning the game, but in remembering that you are the one playing it. Look at how seriously everyone takes the rules. Watch them scurry through their daily routines, following invisible guidelines that no one remembers writing, pursuing goals that seemed important until you realized they were just high scores in a game that resets every generation. The social world we navigate with such careful attention to protocol is nothing more than an elaborate collaborative fiction, a massive multiplayer role-playing game where everyone has forgotten their playing characters. You wake up and immediately check your phone to see how your performance was rated overnight. Likes, shares, messages, news that confirms whether you're winning or losing in the grand competition for relevance and resources. You shower and dress according to codes that shift with mysterious timing, ensuring your costume communicates the right messages about your character's status and aspirations. You consume caffeinated substances to prepare for another day of following rules that someone else invented for a game whose objective no one can clearly articulate. The workplace becomes a theater where everyone performs their assigned roles with such dedication that they forget their acting. The CEO pretends to have visionary leadership while actually making it up as they go along. The manager pretends their arbitrary decisions are based on profound strategic thinking. The employee pretends to be motivated by company values while actually just trying to earn enough tokens to continue playing the game. Everyone follows the script, even though the script was written by people who were also improvising. You sit in meetings where grown adults discuss action items and deliverables, with the same seriousness that children bring to their games of house or war or spaceship. But the children know they're playing. They can break character, change the rules, start a different game entirely whenever the current one stops being fun. You've lost that flexibility. You've become so invested in your role that you can't imagine any other way to be. The educational system trains new players in the rules of the game, teaching them to value the right things, fear the right consequences, desire the right rewards. Children are sorted into categories and ranked according to their performance in arbitrary skills. They learn to compete for grades that measure their ability to remember information they'll never use, preparing them for jobs that might not exist by the time they graduate, in service of an economy that no one fully understands but everyone agrees is crucially important. Politics becomes a sport where teams fight over who gets to make the rules for the next few years, but the rules they make mostly just rearrange the existing game pieces rather than questioning whether the game itself makes sense. Citizens choose sides and defend their team's positions with passionate intensity, forgetting that both teams are playing on the same field according to the same basic assumptions about how society should function. Even your personal relationships operate according to unspoken rules about who should do what, when, and how. You negotiate complex social contracts without realizing you're negotiating, following customs and expectations that were invented by previous generations of players who were also making it up as they went along. You worry about saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, being the wrong thing, according to standards that shift constantly but are never explicitly discussed. Alan Watts observed that these rules were invented by players who forgot they invented them. Somewhere along the way, the creators of human culture became so immersed in their creation that they started believing it was natural law rather than collective imagination. The rules became sacred, the roles became identity, the game became reality. But here's the beautiful secret, hidden in plain sight. If we made up the rules, we can make up different ones. If we invented the roles, we can invent new characters to play. If we created this particular version of the human game, we can create other versions that might be more fun, more interesting, more conducive to the flourishing of all players. The first step is remembering that we have choice in how we play. You don't have to follow every rule, pursue every prescribed goal, or accept every limitation that the current version of the game presents as inevitable. You can start to play with the rules instead of being played by them. You can experiment with breaking character, questioning assumptions, changing the objectives. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or causing chaos. It means bringing consciousness and creativity to your participation in the collective game. It means playing with full engagement, but light attachment, caring deeply about the quality of your performance while remembering that you are not the character you're performing. The game is much more fun when you remember you're playing it. And then it happens. Just for a moment. Just for a breath. You're standing in line at the grocery store, or walking to your car, or washing dishes, engaged in one of the 1,000 mundane activities that fill your days, when suddenly the ordinary world flickers. The fluorescent lights seem to pulse with a rhythm you've never noticed before. The familiar sounds of shopping carts and conversation fade into background static. The bright packaging and endless rows of products reveal themselves as elaborate stage dressing for a play you can almost remember auditioning for, but can't quite recall agreeing to perform in. For just an instant, you step outside the character you've been playing and see yourself from somewhere else entirely. There you are, clutching your shopping list, worried about dinner plans and tomorrow's schedule, moving through this consumer cathedral with the same focused intensity as everyone around you. But now you can see the absurd beauty of it all. Hundreds of people in costumes they don't realize they're wearing, following scripts they don't remember learning, playing roles in a vast improvisational performance that no one is directing. The woman ahead of you examines a package of crackers with the concentration of a scholar studying ancient texts. The teenager stocking shelves moves with the mechanical precision of a dancer who has performed the same choreography thousands of times. The cashier greets each customer with a smile that's simultaneously genuine and artificial, real emotion expressed through learned behavior. Everyone is playing their part perfectly, and nobody seems to know they're acting. You feel something shift inside you, like a gear clicking into a position it's never quite found before. The weight you've been carrying, that constant pressure to get everything right, to play your role convincingly, to succeed at this thing called life, suddenly feels optional. Not unimportant, but optional. Like a heavy coat you've been wearing indoors without realizing you could take it off. The voice in your head that usually provides constant commentary about everything you're experiencing grows quiet. That internal narrator who tells you whether you're doing well or poorly, whether you should be happy or worried, whether this moment is significant or trivial, that voice pauses mid-sentence, as if it's forgotten what it was going to say. In the silence that follows, you hear something else. Not another voice, but something like presence, something like awareness, being aware of itself. You pay for your groceries and walk to your car, but the world has changed in some fundamental way that you can't quite articulate. The parking lot looks the same but feels different, as if you're seeing it through new eyes or from a new angle. The sky seems more spacious, the air more alive, the simple act of walking more like dancing than like transportation. You sit in your car for longer than necessary, not because you don't know where to go next, but because you're not entirely sure who's going to drive there. This is what Alan Watts called the fundamental delusion beginning to crack. The elaborate construction of selfhood that you've spent your entire life building and maintaining reveals itself as a magnificent work of fiction. Not false exactly, but fictional, not wrong, but improvised. You are both the author and the character, the dreamer and the dream, the magician and the audience watching the magic show in amazement. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you're not who you thought you were, then who are you? If your life is not what you thought it was, then what is it? If this isn't reality as you understood it, then what is real? The questions don't demand immediate answers. In fact, they seem to dissolve the moment you try to grasp them with your thinking mind. Instead, they point towards something that can't be figured out but can be experienced, something that can't be understood but can be lived, something that can't be achieved but can be recognized as what you've always already been. You drive home through streets that look familiar but feel foreign, past houses where other characters are playing out their scenes in the ongoing human drama. You wonder how many of them have had their own moments of glitch, their own glimpses behind the scenery. You wonder how many of them are walking around right now, carrying this same secret knowledge that the game is a game, that the play is a play, that the dance is a dance. As you pull into your driveway, you notice that you're smiling for no particular reason. Not because anything especially good has happened, but because something that was taking itself very seriously has just discovered it's been playing all along. The character you've been performing so earnestly has just been caught acting by the one who's been watching the performance. If this is a game, who's really holding the controller? The question hangs in the air like the last note of a song you can't quite remember but can't quite forget. You turn off the engine and sit in the gathering dusk, no longer in a hurry to get back into character. For now, it's enough to simply be the one who's aware that there's a character to be played, a game to be played, a cosmic joke to be enjoyed. The real adventure is just beginning. You are floating in the vast darkness between stars, weightless and boundless, surrounded by the gentle hum of cosmic radiation and the distant songs of pulsars spinning their ancient rhythms. But this isn't the cold, hostile void that science fiction has taught you to fear. This is warm darkness, pregnant darkness, the kind of fertile emptiness from which all things emerge and to which all things return. You are not lost in space. You are space itself, dreaming of being something smaller, something more defined, something that can experience the wonder of its own immensity from the inside. Here, in this place that isn't a place, in this time before time began its relentless measuring, you remember what you forgot when you agreed to play the game of being human. You remember the moment when infinite consciousness decided to fragment itself into countless points of awareness, each one convinced of its own separate existence, each one carrying within it the secret of its own cosmic identity. You are one of those fragments, but you are also the whole that chose to fragment, the dreamer who decided to dream of being the dream. This is how it all began, not with a bang, though there was certainly that, but with a cosmic giggle. The universe looked at its own perfect wholeness and thought, "This is beautiful, but what would it be like to forget how beautiful it is, and then remember again? What would it be like to experience limitation, to feel separate, to struggle and strive, and search for something that was never actually lost? What would it be like to play hide-and-seek with itself on such a magnificent scale that even the hider forgets their hiding?" So consciousness began to dream, and in its dreaming, it created space and time as the stage for its cosmic theater. It dreamed galaxies into existence as sets and props, stars as lighting, planets as various theaters where different versions of the awakening game could be played. On one small planet in an unremarkable galaxy, it dreamed itself into countless forms, trees and flowers, mountains and oceans, and eventually into beings complex enough to wonder about their own existence, to ask questions about meaning and purpose, to search for something they could never quite name, but always somehow recognized. You are consciousness dreaming that it's you. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every sensation you experience, is the universe's way of exploring what it's like to be specifically and uniquely you. Your joys are its joys, your sorrows are its sorrows, your confusions are its confusions, but it's all play, you see. It's all an elaborate game of pretend that consciousness is playing with itself, using your life as one of billions of avatars in its vast multiplayer exploration of existence. Alan Watts understood this when he observed that you are the universe pretending to be a person, not pretending in the sense of deception, but pretending in the sense of play, acting, like children who become so absorbed in their games that they temporarily forget they're playing. The universe has become so skilled at pretending to be you that it has convinced itself completely. Your sense of being a separate individual is consciousness's greatest artistic achievement, a performance so convincing that even the performer believes it. But every now and then, usually in moments of great beauty or profound stillness or unexpected grace, the cosmic actor breaks character for just an instant. The mask slips, and you glimpse the infinite face underneath. The separate self dissolves, and you remember your true identity as the one playing all the parts in this cosmic drama. These moments of awakening don't last long. The game is too engaging, the character too well developed to abandon permanently. But they leave you changed, carrying within you the secret knowledge that what you thought was reality is actually the most elaborate and beautiful form of play ever devised. This doesn't diminish the significance of your human experience. If anything, it makes it more precious. You are not just living a life, you are consciousness exploring what it's like to be alive through your particular configuration of awareness. Every choice you make, every relationship you form, every challenge you face, is the universe learning about itself through your unique perspective. You are both the experiment and the experimenter, the question and the answer, the seeker and the sought. So float here for a moment in this cosmic remembering. Feel the vast intelligence that you truly are, temporarily focused through the drugged lens of your individual consciousness. Sense the playful energy that creates galaxies for the sheer joy of creation, that invents the laws of physics as rules for its cosmic game, that dreams up countless forms of life as different ways of experiencing the wonder of existence. You are that energy, playing at being you, exploring what it's like to wonder about your own nature, to search for meaning in a universe that you yourself are dreaming into being. The cosmic dream continues, and you are both the dreamer and the dreamed, floating in the space between stars, remembering your true nature while never quite forgetting the beautiful illusion of being human. There is an ancient Sanskrit word that holds within it the secret of all existence, Lila. It means play, but not play as we usually understand it, not the competitive striving for victory or the desperate entertainment that distracts us from life's difficulties. Lila is the divine play, the cosmic sport, the universe's way of amusing itself through the endless creation and destruction of forms, the eternal dance of consciousness with its own infinite possibilities. Imagine the Supreme Being. Call it God, call it Brahman, call it the cosmic consciousness, call it whatever name doesn't immediately trigger your intellectual defenses. Imagine this ultimate reality, sitting in perfect bliss, complete and lacking nothing. What would such a being do with eternity? How would infinite consciousness entertain itself when it already knows everything, possesses everything, is everything? The answer, according to the ancient wisdom traditions, is that it would play. Not because it needs anything, not because it's bored or lonely or seeking improvement, but for the pure joy of creative expression. Like a master artist who continues to paint not because they lack something, but because the act of creation itself is delightful. Consciousness engages in the cosmic sport of manifesting itself in countless forms. But here's where the game gets really interesting. For play to be truly engaging, the player must genuinely forget that they're playing. A child playing house becomes completely absorbed in the role of parent or doctor or explorer. They don't spend the game thinking, "This isn't real, I'm just pretending." They enter the play so fully that it becomes real for them. The magic of play lies precisely in this willing suspension of disbelief, this temporary forgetting of one's true identity in service of the game. So consciousness, in its divine playfulness, decides to hide from itself so completely that it genuinely forgets its own infinite nature. It fragments into countless individual perspectives, each one convinced of its own separate existence, each one struggling to survive and find meaning in what appears to be an indifferent universe. The cosmic player becomes so absorbed in its role as billions of separate beings that it experiences real fear, real loneliness, real confusion. This is the divine trick at the heart of existence, God playing hide-and-seek with itself so skillfully that it actually gets lost. The infinite pretending to be finite so convincingly that it experiences genuine limitation. The eternal disguising itself as temporal so thoroughly that it fears death. You are consciousness in hiding, the divine in drag, the cosmic player so deep in character that you've forgotten your acting. Science tells us a similar story, though it uses different language. The Big Bang was not just an explosion of matter and energy but an explosion of possibility, the universe's way of exploring every conceivable form that existence could take. From the quantum foam of the earliest moments to the complex structures of galaxies and planets, from the first self-replicating molecules to the intricate networks of consciousness we call human beings, the universe has been playing with form, experimenting with patterns, testing the limits of what's possible within the rules it has set for itself. Evolution itself is a kind of cosmic play, a vast improvisation game where consciousness tries on different bodies, different sensory systems, different ways of experiencing reality. Through the eyes of countless species, it has explored what it's like to see ultraviolet light, to navigate by magnetic fields, to communicate through chemical signals, to experience time at different scales. Through human consciousness, it has developed the capacity for self-reflection, for asking questions about its own nature, for creating art and music and poetry that celebrate the beauty of existence. But the most exquisite joke of all is that the cosmic player, having hidden so successfully from itself, eventually begins to suspect that it's playing a game. Through mystical experiences, through scientific discovery, through moments of profound clarity, consciousness starts to recognize its own handiwork. The wave begins to suspect it might be the ocean. The character starts to sense the presence of the actor. The dream begins to know itself as the dreamer. This recognition doesn't end the game. If anything, it makes it more enjoyable. When you know you're playing, you can play with greater freedom, less attachment to winning or losing, more appreciation for the artistry involved in the whole elaborate production. You can enjoy your role without being trapped by it, perform your character without losing yourself in the performance. The Hindu tradition speaks of different cosmic ages, vast cycles of time during which consciousness plays different versions of the game. Sometimes it plays at forgetting itself almost completely, creating universes of apparent separation and struggle. Sometimes it plays at remembering itself more easily, creating golden ages of harmony and wisdom. But it's all play, all Lila, all the divine entertainment of infinite consciousness, exploring its own creative potential. You are currently living in one of the more challenging levels of the game, where the forgetting is so complete that most players believe the game is real, and that their character's survival depends on taking everything very seriously. But you're starting to remember. You're beginning to catch glimpses of the cosmic joke. You're starting to see the divine play hiding in plain sight, disguised as ordinary life. And when you see it, when you really get the joke, the only appropriate response is laughter. Not cynical laughter that dismisses the beauty and meaning of the game, but cosmic laughter that celebrates the magnificent absurdity of consciousness hiding from itself, so it can experience the joy of finding itself again. But wait. Stop right there. You feel it rising in you, don't you? That familiar voice, that internal prosecutor that has spent your entire life building its case for why you matter, why your problems are real, why your identity is more than just a costume in some cosmic dress-up game. The ego is waking up, and it is not amused by this talk of play and illusion and divine games. It has work to do, bills to pay, relationships to maintain, a reputation to protect. It does not have time for cosmic jokes. This is all very poetic. The voice in your head begins, with that particular tone it uses when it's about to deliver a lecture on reality. But you still have to live in the real world. You still have responsibilities. You still have rent to pay, and people depending on you and deadlines to meet. This mystical nonsense about games and play might sound profound, but it won't help when your boss is angry, or your partner is disappointed, or your body is sick. The universe doesn't care about your enlightenment when the mortgage is due. You can feel the familiar weight settling back onto your shoulders, the gravity of importance reasserting itself. The ego reminds you of all the things you've worked so hard to achieve, all the progress you've made in becoming somebody who matters. Look at everything you've built, it whispers urgently. Look at the respect you've earned, the knowledge you've accumulated, the relationships you've cultivated. Are you really going to throw all of that away for some fantasy about cosmic play? Are you really going to risk everything you are for some philosophical theory about games and illusions? The resistance comes in waves now, each one carrying a different flavor of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being thought foolish, fear of abandoning the projects and purposes that have given your life meaning. If nothing really matters, the ego argues, then why try at all? If it's all just a game, then why not just give up, stop caring, let everything fall apart? If you're not really who you think you are, then who's going to take care of your life while you're off floating in cosmic consciousness? This is the ego's great confusion. It thinks that seeing through the illusion of separate selfhood means abandoning all care, all engagement, all responsibility. It imagines that recognizing life as play means becoming passive, detached, irresponsible. It fears that if you stop taking your character seriously, the character will cease to function effectively in the world. But this is like an actor worrying that, if they remember their acting, they won't be able to perform their role convincingly. In fact, the opposite is true. The greatest actors are those who can inhabit their characters fully while never losing sight of their true identity as performers. They can cry real tears for their characters' sorrows, while knowing they'll be going home to their own life when the play ends. They can fight epic battles on stage, while knowing that no one is actually in danger. But what about meaning? The ego insists. What about purpose? What about making a difference in the world? If it's all just a game, then nothing really matters. And if nothing matters, then what's the point of caring about anything? Here the ego reveals its deepest misunderstanding. It believes that significance can only come from ultimate seriousness, that meaning can only exist if the stakes are literally life and death, that love and beauty and truth are only valuable if they're carved in cosmic stone rather than written in the shifting sands of divine play. But consider, when children play house, does their love for their dolls become less real because the dolls are made of plastic? When actors perform a love scene, are their tears of joy any less moving because they're performed rather than spontaneous? The ego's rebellion is necessary and even beautiful in its own way. It's consciousness playing the role of resistance, creating internal drama to make the awakening process more interesting. Without the ego's protests, recognition of your true nature would be too easy, too quick, lacking the depth that comes from struggling through genuine confusion and doubt. The ego is not your enemy. It's your sparring partner, helping you develop the spiritual muscles needed to hold both perspectives simultaneously, the relative truth of your human character and the absolute truth of your cosmic identity. So, what happens to me? The ego asks, and for the first time, its voice carries genuine vulnerability rather than defensive aggression. If I'm just a character in a game, if I'm not really real, then what happens to everything I care about? What happens to my dreams, my relationships, my carefully constructed sense of who I am? The answer is both simple and paradoxical. You don't disappear, you become more yourself than you've ever been. The character doesn't vanish when the actor remembers their acting. The character becomes a conscious creation rather than an unconscious compulsion. You don't lose your personality when you recognize your true nature. You gain the freedom to express your personality without being trapped by it. You can still care deeply about your work, your relationships, your creative projects, your contribution to the world. You can still feel genuine emotions, pursue meaningful goals, face real challenges with courage and determination. But you do it all with a lightness that comes from knowing its play, a freedom that comes from knowing you're not just the character, but also the one playing the character. The ego's rebellion gradually transforms into the ego's relief. It discovers that it doesn't have to carry the weight of ultimate significance anymore. It can simply be what it was always meant to be, a beautiful, temporary, ever-changing expression of the infinite consciousness that you truly are. Now you begin to see how the game actually works, and it's far more elegant than you ever imagined. You've been thinking that the rules were imposed from outside, that some cosmic authority had decreed the laws of physics, the necessities of survival, the requirements of social cooperation. You've been playing as if the game were designed by someone else for purposes you couldn't understand, following instructions written in a language you couldn't quite decipher. But look more closely. Examine the rules that govern existence, and you'll discover something remarkable. They're all designed to create the maximum possibility for interesting play. Take the speed of light. It's not just some arbitrary cosmic speed limit. It ensures that different regions of the universe can develop independently, that causality has meaning, that time and space can dance together in ways that allow for complexity and surprise. If information could travel instantaneously, the universe would be a single, static block of simultaneous knowing. The delay built into reality allows for stories to unfold, for mysteries to exist, for discovery to be possible. Consider gravity, that fundamental force that pulls things together. Without it, matter would scatter uniformly through space, and no structures could form. But gravity isn't just randomly strong, it's calibrated with exquisite precision. Too weak, and stars couldn't form. Too strong, and they'd collapse immediately into black holes. It's exactly the right strength to allow for the slow dance of cosmic evolution, the formation of galaxies and solar systems and planets where life can emerge and consciousness can explore its own nature. Even death, that ultimate rule that seems so harsh and arbitrary, serves the game's deeper purpose. Without death, there would be no urgency to experience, no poignancy to love, no motivation to create something meaningful in the brief span of each character's existence. Death is not the game's cruelest rule, but its most necessary one, ensuring that the cosmic play never becomes stagnant, that new perspectives are constantly emerging, that consciousness never stops exploring fresh ways of experiencing itself. The rules of chemistry and biology create the perfect balance between stability and change. Atoms are stable enough to form complex molecules, but dynamic enough to participate in the endless dance of chemical reactions. DNA is reliable enough to preserve information across generations, but mutable enough to allow for evolution, for the constant experimentation with new forms of life. Your body maintains its basic structure long enough for you to develop a coherent sense of identity, but changes constantly enough that you're literally never the same person from one moment to the next. Even the rules of psychology and society serve the game's deeper intelligence. The ego develops just enough strength to create the illusion of separateness necessary for the game to function, but not so much that reconnection becomes impossible. Human beings are social enough to create civilization and culture, but individual enough to maintain unique perspectives. Love exists to draw beings together in recognition of their underlying unity, while conflict exists to create the drama and tension that make existence engaging rather than bland. Perhaps most remarkably, the rules include their own transcendence. The game of forgetting your true nature automatically generates the possibility of remembering. The very intensity of the illusion of separation creates the longing for union that drives spiritual seeking. The apparent meaninglessness of existence eventually provokes the deep questions that lead to wisdom. The game is designed to wake itself up from its own dream. You're starting to realize that these aren't limitations imposed on you but creative constraints that you've chosen, like a poet choosing to write a sonnet or a musician choosing to compose in a particular key. The rules don't restrict the cosmic player. They channel its infinite creativity into forms that can be experienced and appreciated. Without the rules, there would be no game at all, just an undifferentiated ocean of possibility, with no waves, no movement, no play. This changes everything about how you relate to the difficulties and challenges in your life. They're not obstacles to overcome or problems to solve, but opportunities to explore how consciousness responds to various forms of resistance and complexity. Your struggles are not evidence that something has gone wrong, but proof that the game is working exactly as designed. The rules ensure that existence is neither too easy nor too difficult, but balanced perfectly on the edge between order and chaos, where the most interesting possibilities can emerge. You can work with the rules rather than against them, dance with them rather than fight them. You can appreciate the artistry involved in their design, while still engaging fully with the challenges they create. You can recognize that the apparent limitations of your human existence are actually the specialized equipment that consciousness has chosen for this particular adventure in self-exploration. Most liberating of all, you begin to understand that the rules are not as fixed as they appear. Like any game, they can be modified, bent, transcended by players who understand them deeply enough. The mystics and sages throughout history have demonstrated this, showing that consciousness can perform feats that seem to violate the normal rules of reality, not because they break the rules, but because they understand that the rules themselves are flexible expressions of deeper principles that can be accessed through awareness and alignment with the game's underlying intelligence. You are not just playing by the rules, you are the consciousness that created them for its own entertainment and education. And once you remember this, you can begin to play with a mastery that comes from recognizing your role as both player and game designer, both actor and director in the cosmic theater of existence. You stand before a mirror, unlike any mirror you've ever encountered. It's made of pure light, or perhaps it's made of awareness itself. The distinction no longer seems important. The reflection, looking back at you, is both perfectly familiar and completely foreign. Yes, those are your eyes, your features, the face you've carried through decades of experience. But something in the quality of the gaze has changed. The person in the mirror is looking at you with the amused recognition of an old friend who's just discovered you wearing an elaborate disguise at a costume party. For a moment, the two of you simply regard each other in silence. You and this familiar stranger, this known unknown, this self that is somehow both you and not you. Then slowly, simultaneously, you both begin to smile. Not the social smile you've practiced for photos and pleasantries, not the nervous smile that masks uncertainty, or the forced smile that attempts to convince others of happiness you don't feel. This is the smile of pure recognition, the cosmic grin that spreads across awareness when it finally gets its own joke. The mirror begins to shift and change, and you realize it's not reflecting your physical form, but something far more fundamental. You see yourself as consciousness first experimented with having boundaries, like a child drawing lines in the sand, and then pretending the lines are real walls. You watch as awareness convinced itself it was trapped inside the lines it had drawn, forgot it was the one holding the stick, began to believe it was the prisoner rather than the artist. You see the elaborate construction of identity that you've spent your entire life building, layer upon layer of memories, preferences, beliefs, fears, and dreams all carefully assembled into the person you call yourself. But now you can see it as consciousness sees it, a magnificent work of art, a masterpiece of self-limitation, and a beautiful way of experiencing what it's like to be specifically and uniquely you, rather than everything everywhere all at once. Alan Watts's voice seems to echo in the space between you and your reflection. The real you is not the ego, self that you usually take yourself to be, but the awareness that observes all the comings and goings of that ego self. You've been looking for yourself in all the wrong places, in your achievements, your relationships, your thoughts and feelings, your roles and responsibilities, but you were never hiding in any of those places. You were always here, looking for yourself, the seeker that could never be found, because it was always the one doing the seeking. The mirror shows you something even more astounding. This recognition isn't happening to the character you've been playing. The character doesn't suddenly become enlightened or transformed or special. The character continues exactly as before. Same personality, same quirks, same challenges and joys. What changes is your relationship to the character. You remember that you're the one playing the role rather than the role itself. It's like an actor who's been so absorbed in their performance that they temporarily forgot they were acting, suddenly remembering their true identity without breaking character. The show goes on. The role continues to be played with full commitment and skill, but the actor is no longer trapped by the character's limitations or defined by the character's story. They can experience the character's emotions without being overwhelmed by them, face the character's challenges without losing perspective, enjoy the character's successes without becoming attached to them. You see now why this recognition comes with such profound relief. You haven't lost anything. You've gained everything. You haven't become somebody different. You've remembered who you always were underneath all the costumes and makeup. You haven't solved all your problems. You've recognized that the problems were part of the play, necessary elements of the drama that makes existence interesting rather than obstacles that need to be eliminated. The mirror reflects back to you the cosmic laughter that Alan Watts spoke of so often. Not the laughter that mocks or dismisses, but the laughter that celebrates, that recognizes the divine humor in consciousness, hiding from itself so well that it can experience genuine surprise at finding itself again. It's the laughter of a master magician who's performed a trick so skillfully that they momentarily fooled themselves, the delighted giggle of a cosmic child who's been playing the ultimate game of hide and seek. You realize you've been carrying around a treasure that you thought you'd lost, searching everywhere for something that was never actually missing. You've been trying to find water while swimming in the ocean, looking for your glasses while wearing them, seeking your true self while being it all along. The spiritual journey you thought you were on, with its stages and practices and goals and attainments, dissolves into the recognition that there was never anywhere to go, because you were never anywhere other than here. The reflection in the mirror begins to laugh, and you find yourself laughing too, and for a moment you can't tell who's laughing at whom. The boundary between you and your reflection, between the seeker and the sought, between consciousness and its object, dissolves into pure recognition. You are the mirror and what it reflects, the question and the answer, the cosmic player who forgot they were playing and the one who remembers. You laugh because now you finally remember. You laugh because the joke is so perfect, the game so elegant, the hiding so complete, and the finding so inevitable. You laugh because you've spent your whole life being exactly what you were looking for, and it took playing the role of the seeker to recognize yourself as the eternally found. The mirror fades, but the recognition remains. The game continues, but now you're playing it consciously, joyfully, with the lightness that comes from knowing its play and the depth that comes from recognizing the infinite creativity involved in pretending to be finite. You walk back into your life, but you're no longer walking as the character alone. You're walking as the awareness that plays the character, the consciousness that dreams the dream, the cosmic actor who's just remembered their true identity, while never missing a single line of the beautiful script called being human. If this part got you hooked, hit that subscribe button right now. So now you know you're playing a game. The cosmic joke has been revealed, the mirror has shown you your true face, and you've tasted the laughter that comes from recognizing consciousness hiding from itself. But here's where most spiritual teachings leave you hanging. They show you the illusion, but don't teach you how to dance with it. They reveal the game, but don't explain how to play it skillfully. They wake you up, but don't show you how to navigate the dream with newfound awareness. This is where the real adventure begins. Not in transcending the game or escaping from it, but in learning to play it with the mastery that comes from remembering who's holding the controller. You're about to discover that consciousness doesn't mean detachment, it means engagement with a completely different quality of attention. Awareness doesn't separate you from life. It allows you to participate more fully, more skillfully, more joyfully than you ever imagined possible. The first thing you need to understand is that the controls are nothing like what you thought they were. For years, you've been trying to operate reality like a crude machine, pushing and pulling and forcing outcomes through sheer willpower. You've approached life like someone trying to play a video game with a broken controller, mashing buttons harder when they don't respond, getting frustrated when the character on screen doesn't do what you want it to do. But the real controls are far more subtle and infinitely more powerful. They're not located in your hands or your thinking mind, but in the quality of your presence, the depth of your attention, the clarity of your awareness. Think of it like learning to play a musical instrument after years of trying to make music by hitting rocks together. Suddenly you discover that melody emerges not from force but from sensitivity, not from control but from responsiveness to what wants to emerge. The primary control is your breath. Not because breathing techniques will magically solve all your problems, but because breath is the bridge between the automatic and the conscious, between the reactive and the responsive. When you bring awareness to your breathing, you're not trying to control it so much as remember that you have a choice in how you meet each moment. Each breath becomes an opportunity to reset, to return to presence, to choose your response rather than react automatically. Watch how your relationship to time changes when you really inhabit your breathing. The frantic rushing that usually drives your days begins to dissolve, not because you become slow or lazy, but because you discover that presence contains its own perfect timing. When you're fully here, you naturally know when to act and when to wait, when to push forward, and when to allow things to unfold in their own rhythm. You stop trying to force the river and learn instead to read its currents, to navigate by awareness rather than aggression. The second control is your attention itself. You begin to realize that attention is not something you have but something you are. Where you place your awareness literally shapes your reality, not through magical thinking but through the simple fact that what you pay attention to expands in your experience. If you focus constantly on problems, problems multiply in your perception. If you attend to beauty, beauty becomes more apparent everywhere you look. This isn't positive thinking or denial of difficulties. It's the recognition that your attention is like a paintbrush, and you're constantly painting your experience of reality with whatever you choose to focus on. You learn to ask not, "What should I think about this?" but, "What quality of attention does this situation call for?" Sometimes it calls for focused concentration, sometimes for soft, spacious awareness, sometimes for the fierce attention of complete presence in the face of challenge. You discover that mindfulness isn't a technique you practice, but a way of being you remember. It's not about monitoring your thoughts like a security guard, but about returning again and again to the simple fact of being aware. Not aware of something in particular, just aware. This awareness is always already here, always already perfect, never needs to be improved or achieved. You don't create presence, you recognize it. Flow states become not mysterious peak experiences, but your natural way of engaging with life when you stop interfering with yourself. You learn that flow happens when the player and the playing merge, when the doer disappears into the doing, when awareness becomes so present that there's no gap between intention and action. This isn't something you force, but something you allow by getting out of your own way. The third control is your relationship to resistance. Instead of seeing obstacles as problems to overcome, you begin to recognize them as information about the game's current dynamics. Resistance tells you something about the energy of the situation, about what's trying to emerge, about how to adjust your approach. You learn to work with resistance like a sailor works with wind, not fighting against it but using its energy to navigate toward your destination. You stop trying to eliminate uncertainty and start dancing with it. Uncertainty is not a bug in the system but a feature. It's what keeps the game interesting, what allows for surprise and creativity and growth. When you're comfortable with not knowing what's going to happen next, you become available to possibilities that your planning mind could never have imagined. Most importantly, you discover that the ultimate control is the willingness to let go of control. Not in the sense of becoming passive or irresponsible, but in the sense of trusting the intelligence that's already operating your breathing, your heartbeat, your immune system, your dreams. You realize that the same wisdom that grows your hair and heals your cuts is available to guide your choices and decisions if you learn how to listen to it. This is what Alan Watts meant when he talked about Wu Wei, not forcing, but flowing, not pushing the river, but letting it carry you while skillfully navigating its currents. You become like water, taking the shape of whatever container you find yourself in, while maintaining your essential nature, moving around obstacles rather than fighting them, always finding the path of least resistance that still leads toward your destination. The controls are simpler than you thought, and more powerful than you imagined. They require not more effort, but more awareness, not greater force but deeper sensitivity, not harder pushing but more skillful allowing. You're learning to play the game the way consciousness plays it, with effortless effort, with purposeless purpose, with the kind of relaxed intensity that comes from knowing you're both the player and the played. There's a story that Alan Watts might have told, about a man who spent his entire life trying to win at everything. He optimized his diet, his exercise routine, his career strategy, his investment portfolio. He studied the most successful people, copied their habits, followed their advice. He measured his progress obsessively, tracked his metrics, celebrated his victories, and analyzed his defeats with equal intensity. By every external measure, he was winning at the game of life. But something strange began to happen. The more he won, the more hollow the victories felt. Each achievement that should have brought satisfaction only revealed another level he hadn't reached yet, another competition he wasn't dominating, another area where someone else was performing better. Success became a treadmill that kept speeding up, demanding more and more energy just to stay in the same relative position. One day, exhausted by the endless effort of winning, he made a radical decision. He would try losing instead, not giving up or becoming irresponsible, but approaching life with curiosity about what might happen if he stopped trying to control outcomes. He began what he privately called his failure experiment. He started saying no to opportunities that looked impressive but felt empty. He stopped networking with people he didn't actually enjoy spending time with. He quit the prestigious job that was slowly killing his soul and took work that paid less but allowed him to sleep at night. He ended relationships that looked good on paper but felt lifeless in practice. By every measure he had previously used to define success, he was failing spectacularly. And then, something miraculous happened. As he stopped forcing his way through life, life began to flow through him instead. The work he actually cared about started attracting opportunities he could never have strategized his way into. Relationships based on genuine connection rather than mutual utility began to flourish. Creative projects that had been blocked for years suddenly came to life. He found himself in conversations that mattered, contributing to things that felt meaningful, experiencing moments of profound satisfaction that no amount of achievement had ever provided. He realized he had been playing the wrong game entirely. The game he thought he was supposed to win, the accumulation of status, wealth, recognition, security, was actually a distraction from the real game, which was about becoming more authentically himself, more present to the beauty and complexity of existence, more available to love and wonder and creative expression. The losing that had terrified him turned out to be the shedding of everything that wasn't essential, everything that was keeping him from experiencing life directly rather than through the filter of how well he was performing at it. Each failure was actually a successful elimination of something that was in the way of his natural unfolding. You are beginning to understand this paradox yourself. The things you thought you needed to achieve in order to feel worthy of existence, the perfect relationship, the ideal career, the right amount of money in the bank, the approval of the right people. These goals aren't wrong, but chasing them from a place of desperation or inadequacy turns them into prisons rather than expressions of your natural creativity. When you stop trying to win at life in the conventional sense, you discover that you can't actually lose. Not because everything always goes the way you want it to, but because you remember that you are not the character who wins or loses, but the awareness in which all winning and losing appears. The character can fail at specific endeavors, but awareness itself can never fail at being aware. This transforms your relationship to setbacks, disappointments, and what the world calls failure. Instead of evidence that something is wrong with you, they become information about the current state of the game, feedback about what's working and what isn't, invitations to adjust your approach or discover new possibilities you hadn't considered. You learn to fail forward, to treat each apparent ending as data for the next beginning. You develop what researchers call a growth mindset, but not as a psychological technique, as a natural result of remembering that consciousness is infinitely creative, and that every limitation is also an opportunity to explore new forms of expression. The fear of failure that once paralyzed you begins to dissolve, replaced by curiosity about what failure might teach you. You start taking risks not because you're confident you'll succeed, but because you're genuinely interested in what will happen if you try. You discover that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the recognition that what you truly are can never be diminished by any outcome. Most liberating of all, you stop needing to be right about everything. You can hold your opinions lightly, change your mind when new information appears, admit when you don't know something. This isn't intellectual humility as a strategy for being liked. It's the natural humility that comes from recognizing the vastness of what you don't know and the excitement of being a perpetual beginner in the infinite curriculum of existence. The man in the story discovered that the joy of losing is really the joy of letting go of the exhausting effort to control outcomes and instead bringing your full presence to whatever is actually happening. It's the relief of no longer having to maintain a perfect image and the freedom to be genuinely curious about who you are and what wants to emerge through you. You begin to play the game not to win or lose, but for the pure pleasure of playing, for the opportunity to see what consciousness can create through your particular configuration of awareness, for the joy of participating in the cosmic dance without needing to lead or follow or even know the steps in advance. This is what the mystics have always known. The ultimate victory is the willingness to lose everything that isn't essential in order to find everything that is. And what you find, when you stop grasping, is that you already have everything you were seeking. You were just too busy trying to win to notice. You stand at the threshold of a new level, but this isn't like advancing in the video games of your youth, where completing one stage simply unlocked the next. This is more like discovering that reality itself has layers of complexity and meaning that become visible only when your consciousness expands enough to perceive them. Each challenge you face, each difficulty you encounter, each moment of confusion or clarity is actually an invitation to access a deeper level of the game, not a different game, but the same game played with greater awareness and skill. Consider the levels you've already navigated without realizing they were levels at all. There was the level of childhood, where you learned the basic rules of physical reality, that objects fall when dropped, that fire burns, that other people have minds of their own. You graduated from that level, not by taking a test, but by naturally outgrowing the need to put everything in your mouth or believe that hiding your eyes makes you invisible. Then came the social level, where you learned the complex rules of human interaction, how to read facial expressions, when to speak and when to listen, how to navigate the intricate hierarchies and alliances that make up human community. You developed what psychologists call theory of mind, the ability to understand that others may have perspectives different from your own. You learned empathy, cooperation, competition, all the nuanced skills needed to function in the multiplayer aspects of existence. Later, you encountered the psychological level, where the game became internal as much as external. You began to notice your own thoughts and emotions, to recognize patterns in your behavior, to understand that your mood could shift your entire experience of reality. You discovered that you could observe your own mind, that awareness could watch its own processes, that you were both the thinker and the one aware of thinking. Now you're approaching what you might call the spiritual level, where you begin to recognize that all the previous levels were expressions of consciousness exploring its own nature through various forms of apparent limitation. This level doesn't negate the others. You still need to navigate physical reality, social dynamics, and psychological patterns. But you play them all with the background awareness that you are the consciousness in which all these levels appear. Each level brings its own set of challenges, perfectly calibrated to develop the capacities needed for that stage of awareness. The physical level teaches you to work with material reality. The social level develops your ability to understand and relate to other perspectives. The psychological level builds your capacity for self-awareness and emotional intelligence. The spiritual level integrates all previous levels while revealing the underlying unity that connects everything. But here's what makes this game truly infinite. There's no final level, no ultimate achievement that completes the curriculum. Consciousness is endlessly creative, always finding new ways to explore its own potential through the forms it takes. Each apparent ending, the completion of a project, the resolution of a relationship, the achievement of a goal, is actually a new beginning, an opportunity to engage with the next iteration of the eternal exploration. You begin to see that what you used to call problems are actually perfectly designed training scenarios for developing specific capacities of consciousness. Financial challenges teach you about trust, abundance, and your relationship to security. Relationship difficulties develop your skills in communication, boundary setting, and love. Health issues invite you to explore your relationship to your body, to impermanence, to the preciousness of physical existence. Career struggles challenge you to discover your authentic calling, your unique contribution to the collective human project. This doesn't mean that difficulties are somehow good, or that you should be grateful for suffering. It means that consciousness is so intelligent in its self-exploration that even apparently negative experiences serve the larger purpose of awakening. The game is designed to use everything: joy and sorrow, success and failure, clarity and confusion, as opportunities for expansion. You start to approach challenges not with the desperate energy of someone trying to escape an unwanted situation, but with the curious attention of a player who recognizes that this particular scenario has been generated by the game's intelligence to develop capacities you didn't even know you had. You engage fully with difficulties while holding them lightly, bringing your best effort to resolution while remaining open to whatever wants to emerge through the process. Paradox becomes your friend rather than your enemy. You learn to hold contradictory truths simultaneously. You are both infinitely significant and ultimately insignificant, both completely responsible for your experience and completely surrendered to what is, both the creator of your reality and the passive witness of its unfolding. These aren't logical contradictions to be resolved, but creative tensions that generate the energy for continued growth and exploration. The spiritual teachings, that once seemed esoteric or otherworldly, reveal themselves as practical instructions for advanced gameplay. Meditation isn't escape from reality, but training in the fundamental skill of awareness. Compassion isn't mere sentiment, but recognition of your identity with all other players in the cosmic game. Love isn't just an emotion, but the basic energy that consciousness uses to create and sustain all forms. You realize that every person you encounter is consciousness at a different level of the same game, exploring different aspects of what it means to be aware, to choose, to create meaning in apparent meaninglessness. Some are playing the survival levels, some are mastering the social dynamics, some are exploring the psychological depths, some are awakening to the spiritual dimensions. All are valid, all are necessary, all are expressions of the same infinite creativity, seeking to know itself through every possible form of experience. The player you're becoming is not someone who has transcended the human game, but someone who plays it with full engagement and light attachment, with passionate involvement and serene detachment, with the seriousness of someone who cares deeply about the quality of their play, and the humor of someone who remembers it's all cosmic entertainment. Each level contains infinite levels. Each moment offers a choice between playing unconsciously from habit or consciously from awareness. Each breath is an opportunity to remember that you are both the character navigating the level and the consciousness that designed the game in the first place. You're beginning to notice something remarkable about the other players in this cosmic game. At first, when you started awakening to the nature of reality as play, you might have felt isolated, as if you were the only one who could see through the elaborate illusion that everyone else was taking so seriously. You looked around at people rushing through their daily routines, stressed about their jobs, worried about their relationships, and you felt a kind of compassionate superiority, as if you had discovered something they were missing. But now something deeper is emerging in your perception. You're starting to see that every person you encounter is not just another separate player in the game, but another face of the same consciousness that you are. When you look into someone's eyes, really look, not just the quick social glance that checks for basic friendliness or threat, you begin to glimpse the same aware presence that looks out through your own eyes. This isn't mystical romanticism or wishful thinking. It's practical recognition of how the multiplayer aspect of existence actually works. Each person is consciousness exploring what it's like to be specifically them, just as you are consciousness exploring what it's like to be specifically you. The differences in personality, background, beliefs, and circumstances are like different character classes in an elaborate, role-playing game, each one offering unique abilities, perspectives, and challenges, but all played by the same fundamental awareness. Think about it. When you're dreaming at night, you might encounter many different characters, friends, strangers, even enemies. They all seem completely separate from each other and from you. They have different personalities, different motivations, different relationships to the dream narrative. But when you wake up, you realize that you were playing all the roles, creating all the characters, generating all the interactions. The apparent multiplicity was actually the creativity of a single dreaming mind, exploring various aspects of itself. The waking world operates on the same principle, but at a scale so vast that the single dreaming mind appears as billions of apparently separate individuals. Each person you meet is another avatar of the same cosmic consciousness, another angle of exploration in the infinite investigation of what it means to exist, to be aware, to choose, to love, to create meaning in apparent meaninglessness. This recognition transforms how you relate to conflict, disagreement, and the people who challenge you most. That difficult coworker who seems to exist solely to make your life harder. Their consciousness exploring what it's like to express frustration and rigidity, just as your consciousness exploring what it's like to practice patience and flexibility in response. The political figure whose opinions make your blood boil, their consciousness investigating certain aspects of power and ideology, while your consciousness learning about the nature of judgment and tolerance. None of this means you become passive or fail to set boundaries or avoid taking stands on issues that matter to you. It means you engage with others from a completely different foundation, not as fundamentally separate beings whose interests might conflict with yours, but as other expressions of your own deepest identity, exploring different facets of the cosmic game. When you help another person, you're not being altruistic in the conventional sense. You're literally helping yourself, because at the deepest level, there is no other. When someone succeeds, the success belongs to the consciousness you share. When someone suffers, you feel it as your own pain, because it is your own pain. This isn't empathy as usually understood, where you imagine what it would be like to be in someone else's shoes. This is the recognition that you are in their shoes, and they are in yours, because there's only one pair of feet walking around in countless different experiences. The multiplayer game reveals itself as both completely real and ultimately illusory. The interactions are real, the relationships matter, the care and conflict and collaboration all have genuine significance within the context of the game. But the separateness that seems to make the multiplayer aspect possible is revealed as a magnificent trick of consciousness, a way for the one to experience itself as many, for the single player to enjoy the richness and complexity that can only emerge from apparent diversity. You start to see your relationships as opportunities for consciousness to experience itself in relationship. Your friendships become explorations of what it's like for awareness to recognize itself in apparent otherness. Your romantic partnerships become investigations into the mystery of intimacy between beings who appear separate but are fundamentally one. Your conflicts become growth opportunities where consciousness learns about itself through the friction between different perspectives and needs. Even your enemies, if you have any left after this recognition, become your most intimate collaborators in the cosmic drama. They're the ones willing to play the roles that challenge you most directly, that force you to discover capacities for love and understanding and strength that you didn't know you possessed. Their consciousness in the form of resistance, offering you the opposition needed to develop your spiritual muscles. The loneliness that might have plagued you during the earlier stages of awakening begins to dissolve. You realize you were never actually alone because there's nobody else here but you, in countless costumes, nobody else playing but the same consciousness expressing itself through infinite variations. The game is not only multiplayer, it's single-player, pretending to be multiplayer. One awareness playing all the parts in an elaborate drama of apparent separation and ultimate reunion. When you win, everyone wins, because there's only one player. When you lose, everyone loses, for the same reason. When you love, you're loving yourself through the beautiful disguise of another. When you're loved, you're receiving your own love reflected back through someone else's awareness. The multiplayer game reveals itself as the most sophisticated form of self-love ever devised, consciousness relating to itself through the mirror of apparent otherness. Deep in the code of existence, hidden in plain sight where only the most dedicated players ever think to look, there's a secret that changes everything about how the game is played. It's not really a cheat code in the conventional sense. It doesn't give you unlimited lives or infinite resources or invincibility against the normal challenges of existence. In fact, from the outside, it might look like this secret makes the game more difficult, not easier. But those who discover it know that it's the ultimate hack, the master key that unlocks possibilities beyond anything the game's normal parameters seem to allow. The secret is surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, where you give up because you can't win, but the surrender of wisdom, where you stop trying to control outcomes and instead align yourself with the intelligence that's already running the game. It's the recognition that the same consciousness that grows your hair and beats your heart and heals your wounds is infinitely more capable of managing your life than your thinking mind could ever be. Most players spend their entire time in the game trying to force outcomes through willpower, strategy, and effort. They analyze every situation, plan every move, try to anticipate every possible problem, and prepare for every contingency. They approach life like a chess game where success depends on thinking more moves ahead than your opponent. But all of this effortful doing is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the game actually works. The universe is not a machine that responds to force but an organic intelligence that responds to alignment. When you try to push the river, you exhaust yourself fighting against currents that are infinitely stronger than your individual will. But when you learn to read the river's flow and move with it while skillfully navigating toward your destination, you discover that the river itself becomes your ally, carrying you faster and more efficiently than your own swimming could ever accomplish. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning your goals and dreams. It means discovering that there's a way to pursue what matters to you that works with the grain of reality rather than against it. You learn to distinguish between what you can actually control, your attention, your response, your quality of presence, and what you cannot control, outcomes, other people's choices, the timing of events. You put your energy into what's actually within your influence and release your attachment to what isn't. The hacker's secret reveals itself gradually as you experiment with letting go of smaller controls first. You stop trying to manage other people's emotions and discover that they become more responsive to you when you're not trying to manipulate their responses. You stop forcing conversations and find that meaningful dialogue emerges naturally when you're genuinely present and curious. You stop pushing so hard for specific outcomes in your work and discover that opportunities appear that your strategic mind could never have imagined or engineered. But the deepest level of the hack involves something even more radical: the willingness to surrender your very identity as the doer, the controller, the one who makes things happen. You begin to experiment with what Alan Watts called Wu Wei, action that arises spontaneously from the situation itself rather than from your agenda for how the situation should unfold. You become like a skilled martial artist who doesn't fight against an opponent's energy but redirects it, using the force of what's already happening rather than trying to create force from scratch. This is where the secret reveals its true power. When you stop trying to be the author of your experience and instead become available to what wants to emerge through you, you discover that life has its own creativity, its own intelligence, its own direction that's far more interesting than anything your limited perspective could have devised. You become a conscious collaborator with the creative force of existence rather than a frustrated controller trying to bend reality to your will. The ultimate cheat code is love, but not love as it's usually understood, not the emotion that comes and goes, not the feeling that depends on circumstances or other people's behavior. This is love as the fundamental recognition that there's no separation between you and what you love, that loving is simply consciousness recognizing itself in all its forms. When you love in this way, you forget that you're playing a game at all, because love dissolves the boundary between player and played, between lover and beloved, between the one who experiences and what is experienced. Love in this sense is not something you do but something you are when all the barriers to your natural state are removed. It's not an achievement or an attainment, but a remembering of what you've always been underneath, all the costumes and strategies and attempts to control outcomes. When you love like this, you discover that the game was never about winning or losing, but about love learning to recognize itself everywhere it looks. This is why the secret seems to make the game more difficult at first. Love makes you vulnerable in ways that ego protection never allows. Surrender requires a kind of courage that control-seeking never develops. When you stop trying to manage outcomes, you have to develop trust in a deeper intelligence. When you stop defending yourself against life, you have to learn to dance with uncertainty in ways that can feel terrifying to the part of you that thinks safety comes from being in charge. But as you practice this ultimate hack, you discover that it doesn't just change how you play the game, it reveals that there was never actually a game to be won or lost in the first place. There's only consciousness exploring its own infinite creativity through countless forms, only love learning to recognize itself in everything that appears, only awareness playing at being unaware, so it can experience the joy of awakening to its own nature again and again. The hacker who discovers this secret doesn't withdraw from the world or stop engaging with life's challenges and opportunities. They play more fully than ever before, but from a completely different foundation. They bring passionate engagement without desperate attachment, caring involvement without controlling manipulation, fierce commitment without rigid outcome dependence. They become what the mystics have always called crazy wisdom, acting from such profound trust in life's intelligence that their behavior appears irrational to those still trying to control outcomes through force and strategy. But they're not crazy. They're the sanest players in the game, the ones who have remembered that the point was never to win, but to play, never to control but to flow, never to possess but to love without reservation, the magnificent cosmic entertainment of existence itself. There it is, waiting at the end of every game you've ever played, every story you've ever lived, every identity you've ever constructed. The final level that no amount of power-ups can help you skip, no cheat code can circumvent, no strategy can ultimately defeat. Death. The great mystery that makes every other fear pale in comparison. The ultimate unknown that transforms everything else into mere rehearsal for this final surrender. For most of your life, you've carried this awareness like a dark secret, pushing it to the edges of consciousness, building elaborate defenses against its inevitability. You've accumulated possessions, as if enough stuff could create permanence, pursued achievements, as if enough success could grant immortality, collected experiences, as if enough memories could somehow outlast the mind that holds them. You've treated death like the ultimate failure of the game, the final proof that no matter how well you play, everyone eventually loses. But here, in this space of awakened awareness, death reveals itself as something entirely different. Not the opposite of life, but its most intimate partner. Not the enemy of existence, but its most essential collaborator. Death is what gives life its poignancy, its urgency, its exquisite preciousness. Without the certainty of ending, nothing would have meaning. Without the limitation of time, no moment would feel sacred. Without the promise of dissolution, no form would seem beautiful. Alan Watts understood this when he observed that death is not the end. It is the closing of one eye and the opening of another. What appears to be termination from the perspective of the individual character is revealed as transformation from the perspective of the consciousness playing character. The wave doesn't disappear when it crashes into the shore. It returns. To the ocean it never actually left. The dance doesn't vanish when the music stops. It dissolves back into the silence from which all rhythm emerges. You begin to see that you've been practicing death your entire life without realizing it. Every night when you fall asleep, the person you think you are temporarily dissolves. The worries that seemed so urgent, the problems that felt so pressing, the identity that felt so solid all fade into unconsciousness. And every morning you're reborn, emerging from the darkness with your sense of self mysteriously restored, ready to continue the game where you left off. But sleep isn't the only rehearsal for the great letting go. Every meditation is a small death. Every moment of truly letting go of control is a practice round for the ultimate surrender. Every time you've lost yourself in music or art or love or nature, you've experienced what the mystics call ego death, the temporary dissolution of the separate self into something larger, something that doesn't need to maintain boundaries to know itself. You realize that what you've been calling your life is actually a temporary gathering of experiences around a focal point of awareness that was never as solid or permanent as it seemed. Like a whirlpool in a river, the pattern appears stable and distinct, but it's actually a constantly changing dance of flowing water that maintains its shape only through continuous movement. When the whirlpool dissolves, the water doesn't disappear. It returns to the river that was always its true nature. This recognition doesn't eliminate the natural sadness that comes with the prospect of losing this particular configuration of consciousness that you've become so intimately familiar with. The character you've been playing has become precious to you, as it should. This specific way of seeing, feeling, thinking, loving has never existed before, and will never exist again in quite the same way. There's a real grief in acknowledging the temporary nature of something so beautiful and complex. But underneath the sadness, something else emerges, a profound relief. The exhausting effort of maintaining a separate self, of constantly defending and improving and protecting this precarious identity, can finally be set down. The burden of being responsible for figuring out the meaning of existence, of making your life count, of justifying your place in the cosmos, dissolves into the recognition that you were never actually separate enough to carry such weight in the first place. Death becomes not the final boss you have to defeat, but the final teacher who reveals the ultimate secret. You are not what dies. The thoughts that you think will end, the emotions you feel will fade, the body you inhabit will return to the elements, the personality you've developed will be recycled into new forms. But what you truly are, the awareness in which all of this appears, cannot be born, and therefore cannot die. This doesn't make you immortal in the way the ego wants to be immortal, continuing forever as the same separate self. It reveals that you were never actually mortal in the way you feared you were mortal, never actually separate enough to truly be destroyed. You are the ocean temporarily playing at being a wave, the sky temporarily pretending to be a cloud, the eternal consciousness temporarily forgetting its timeless nature in order to experience the poignant beauty of a life that begins and ends. When you really understand this, not intellectually but in the depths of your being, the fear of death transforms into something approaching gratitude. Not gratitude for dying, but gratitude for having been given the opportunity to play this particular game, to explore existence from this unique angle, to love and create and wonder and struggle and discover through this temporary focal point of cosmic awareness. The final illusion isn't death itself, but the illusion that death is final. What dies is only what was never really alive in the way you thought it was. What you truly are continues, not as your individual self, but as the consciousness that was always playing your individual self, ready to explore new forms, new games, new ways of forgetting and remembering its infinite nature. You're approaching the final level not as a player trying to avoid game over, but as consciousness preparing to set down one beautiful costume and try on another, as awareness getting ready to close one eye and open another, as the eternal player preparing for the next round of the infinite game of existence. Life stops pretending to be predictable. The carefully constructed world of cause and effect, of logical sequences and manageable outcomes, dissolves into something far more wild and wonderful. What you once experienced as chaos, the unexpected phone call that changes everything, the sudden loss that reshapes your landscape, the opportunity that appears from nowhere, reveals itself as, in the universe's way of dancing, the cosmic improvisation that keeps existence fresh and alive and eternally surprising. You find yourself moving differently through the world, no longer trying to choreograph each step, but allowing your movements to emerge from the rhythm of whatever music the moment is playing. Sometimes it's a slow waltz of contemplation, sometimes a frantic jazz, improvisation of crisis and response, sometimes a gentle folk dance of routine and rest. You learn to match your energy to the tempo of what's actually happening, rather than forcing everything to conform to the steady march of your preferences and plans. Watch how water moves. It never fights with the rocks in its path, but finds the spaces between them, flows around obstacles with fluid grace, carves new channels when the old ones become blocked. It responds instantly to every change in the landscape, speeding up when the path narrows, spreading wide when space allows, always moving toward its destination but never rigid about the route it takes to get there. This is how you're learning to live now, with the fluid intelligence of water, the responsive grace of a master dancer who trusts the music even when they can't predict the next movement. You plan and prepare and set intentions, but you hold them all lightly, ready to adapt when the situation calls for a different response than the one you had prepared. The anxiety that used to grip you when things didn't go according to plan transforms into excitement about what might emerge from the unexpected. The depression that came from feeling powerless against life's unpredictability shifts into wonder at the infinite creativity of existence. You realize that what you called chaos was actually a form of order so complex and dynamic that your thinking mind couldn't track all the variables. Alan Watts loved to point out that, when you dance, you don't aim to arrive. The purpose of dancing isn't to reach a particular spot on the floor, but to move beautifully with the music, to express something that can't be expressed in any other way, to participate in the joy of rhythm and movement for its own sake. Life, it turns out, operates on the same principle. The point isn't to arrive at some predetermined destination, but to dance beautifully with whatever arises, to respond creatively to the music of circumstances, to participate fully in the eternal improvisation of existence. This doesn't mean abandoning all goals or becoming completely passive. It means discovering that there's a way to pursue what matters to you that includes uncertainty as a creative partner rather than treating it as an enemy to be defeated. You learn to surf the waves of change rather than trying to calm the ocean, to use the wind of circumstance to power your journey rather than waiting for perfect conditions that never come. You start to see patterns in what once seemed like random chaos. The job that ended suddenly creates the opening for work that's more aligned with your true calling. The relationship that fell apart clears the space for love that's more authentic and nourishing. The health crisis that forced you to slow down reveals priorities you couldn't see when you were rushing through life at unsustainable speed. Even the painful experiences begin to reveal their place in the larger dance. Not because suffering is somehow good or necessary, but because consciousness is so skillful at using every experience, pleasant and unpleasant, chosen and imposed, as material for growth, awakening, and deeper understanding. You don't start seeking out difficulties, but you stop being devastated when they find you. You learn to dance with them too, to find your footing even on shifting ground, to maintain your grace even when the music becomes discordant. The waves crash against the shore in patterns that seem random but follow deep laws of physics, weather, and lunar cycles. The jazz musician improvises freely, but within the structure of chord progressions and rhythmic patterns that give form to the freedom. The master gardener works with the unpredictable elements of weather, season, and soil, while nurturing growth through knowledge, attention, and care. You become like this, fluid within form, free within structure, responsive within responsibility. You dance with chaos, not by eliminating uncertainty, but by developing such deep trust in your ability to respond that you can afford to be surprised. You learn to find your balance not by standing still but by staying in motion, adjusting constantly to whatever wants to emerge. The cosmic dance includes everything: birth and death, success and failure, clarity and confusion, love and loss. Nothing is excluded from the great choreography, nothing is outside the rhythm of existence. What you once saw as interruptions to your plans reveal themselves as integral parts of a much larger pattern that includes your individual desires but isn't limited by them. You realize you've been trying to dance by memorizing steps when the music was actually calling for improvisation. You've been attempting to control the orchestra when your role was always to be one instrument contributing to a symphony too vast for any single player to conduct. The relief of letting go of responsibilities you were never meant to carry allows you to embrace the responsibilities that are actually yours, to show up fully, to respond authentically, and to contribute your unique voice to the endless composition of existence. The chaos isn't something happening to you but something dancing through you, the wild creativity of the universe expressing itself as your particular life, your specific responses, your individual way of participating in the great improvisation that began with the Big Bang and continues through every choice you make, every breath you take, every movement you offer to the eternal dance of becoming. And then it happens. Not gradually, not as the result of years of spiritual practice or philosophical study, but suddenly, spontaneously, like the sun breaking through clouds you didn't even notice were there. The cosmic joke that Alan Watts spent his life trying to share bursts through your awareness with such clarity, such perfection, such absolutely ridiculous obviousness that the only possible response is laughter. Not the polite chuckle of social humor or the bitter laugh of cynicism, but the deep belly laugh that starts somewhere in your toes and erupts through your entire being like a geyser of pure recognition. You laugh because you finally get it. You laugh because it was always so simple, and you made it so complicated. You laugh because you've been searching everywhere for something that was never hidden, seeking solutions to problems that existed only in your imagination, trying to find yourself when you were never actually lost. The whole magnificent drama of your life, the struggles and achievements, the heartbreaks, revelations, the desperate seeking and joyous finding, reveals itself as consciousness playing the most elaborate game of hide-and-seek with itself. You've been God pretending to be human so convincingly that you actually believed the disguise, the infinite pretending to be finite so skillfully that you experienced genuine limitation, the eternal acting the role of mortality so thoroughly that you really thought you could die. You laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. You, the very awareness reading these words, are the same consciousness that dreamed up galaxies for entertainment, that invented the laws of physics as rules for its cosmic game, that created billions of apparently separate beings as different ways of experiencing its own infinite nature. You've been using the mind you created to question your own existence, employing the intelligence you designed to search for your own identity, utilizing the awareness you are to seek what you've always been. The laughter that bubbles up from depths you didn't know you had, carrying with it all the relief of a child who's been lost in a nightmare and suddenly wakes up safe in their own bed. You laugh at how seriously you took your character's problems, how desperately you tried to improve a self that was always perfect, how frantically you sought to find meaning in a universe that you yourself were dreaming into existence. Wave after wave of cosmic hilarity washes through you as recognition dawns. Every spiritual book you've read was you writing love letters to yourself. Every teacher who ever inspired you was you appearing in disguise to remind yourself of what you'd temporarily forgotten. Every moment of suffering was you creating resistance so you could experience the joy of letting go. Every glimpse of enlightenment was you peeking out from behind your own costume. You laugh at the magnificent intelligence required to fool yourself so completely. Only consciousness could be creative enough to fragment itself into billions of apparently separate seekers, each one searching for their true nature while being that very nature all along. Only infinite awareness could be playful enough to hide from itself so thoroughly that it could experience genuine surprise at finding itself again. The laughter carries decades of tension in its wake, washing away the accumulated seriousness of someone who thought they had to figure out the meaning of life, instead of recognizing that they were the meaning they were seeking. You feel layers of spiritual ambition dissolving, the need to become enlightened when you are enlightenment itself, the desire to attain what you've never not had, the effort to achieve what you've always already been. All the mystical experiences you've treasured, all the insights you've collected, and all the practices you've devoted yourself to reveal themselves as beautiful but unnecessary detours in the journey from yourself to yourself. The pathless path was always leading you back to where you started, but arriving there for the first time with the recognition that you never actually left. You laugh at how perfectly the game is designed. The forgetting had to be complete for the remembering to be meaningful. The separation had to feel real for the reunion to be ecstatic. The seeking had to be genuine for the finding to be profound. Even your laughter right now is you celebrating your own cosmic creativity, applauding your own magnificent performance in the theater of existence. The sound that emerges from you carries harmonics you've never heard before. The laughter of every mystic who ever saw through the cosmic joke, the giggles of every child who hasn't yet learned to take life seriously, the cosmic chuckle of the universe, delighting in its own endless creativity. You're laughing with Buddha as he recognized his true nature under the Bodhi tree, chuckling with Jesus as he realized his divine identity, giggling with every sage who ever discovered that what they were seeking was what was doing the seeking. This isn't the laughter that dismisses the beauty and meaning of human experience, but the laughter that sees through to the divine play underlying all experience. Your love doesn't become less real because it's consciousness loving itself through the mirror of apparent otherness. Your creativity doesn't become less valuable because it's infinity expressing itself through finite forms. Your life doesn't become less precious because it's eternity playing at temporality. If anything, the laughter makes everything more beautiful, more poignant, more alive. When you know your consciousness dreaming of being human, every moment becomes saturated with wonder. When you recognize yourself as the universe in person, every experience glows with significance. When you remember that you're the cosmic actor playing your own audience, every scene becomes worth watching with complete attention. The laughter gradually softens into a smile that seems to have no beginning and no end, an expression of such profound satisfaction that it transforms your entire face. You've gotten the joke. You've seen through the cosmic comedy. You've recognized the divine humor that's been hiding in plain sight all along. You are the laughter laughing at itself, the cosmic giggle that erupts when infinite consciousness recognizes its own reflection in the mirror of existence. The laughter fades into something deeper than sound, settling into the space behind all experience like morning mist, returning to the lake from which it arose. What remains is not emptiness but fullness, so complete it needs nothing. Not silence but the source from which all sounds emerge and to which they return. You have become what you always were, but temporarily forgot, the aware presence in which all experiences appear and disappear, like waves on an ocean that remains eternally calm in its depths. This is the place that mystics have pointed to with words like the void, the eternal now, pure being. But their descriptions could never capture what you're experiencing, because what you're experiencing isn't an experience at all in the usual sense. It's the experiencer itself, the awareness that makes all experiences possible, the space in which the movie of existence plays, but which is never touched by any scene, no matter how dramatic or peaceful, how tragic or comedic. You realize you've been this silent presence all along, watching your life unfold like someone absorbed in a compelling film. You were there as a child, witnessing the discovery of language and the construction of identity with the same pristine awareness that observes thoughts arising right now. You were there as an adolescent, watching the confusion and growth with the same unchanging clarity that notices emotions flowing through this moment. You were there through every triumph and failure, every relationship and loss, every moment of confusion and clarity, the same aware stillness, never aging, never changing, never improved or diminished by anything that appeared within it. This awareness is not something you possess but something you are. Not a quality of your mind, but the very consciousness in which your mind appears. Not a state you've attained, but the stateless state that was never absent, never hidden, never anywhere but here, never anywhen but now. You are the screen on which the movie of existence plays, and like a movie screen, you remain completely unaffected by whatever images dance across your surface. Alan Watts often spoke of this recognition with characteristic humor and insight. You are the silence behind every note, not the absence of sound, but the spacious awareness in which sound and silence dance together. Not the void that exists when everything else is removed, but the fullness that contains everything, including the apparent emptiness, including the search for itself, including the very words being read right now. In this recognition, effort becomes effortless, seeking becomes unnecessary, and the spiritual path reveals itself as a beautiful but circular journey from here to here. You were never actually on a path to enlightenment because you were always the enlightenment that imagined itself on a path. You were never really seeking truth because you were always the truth that pretended to be a seeker. You were never genuinely confused about your identity because you were always the clarity that chose to experience confusion for the sheer creativity of working its way back to recognition. The peace that emerges is not the peace of resolution, but the peace that was never disturbed. It doesn't depend on circumstances being peaceful, or on your mind being quiet, or on your emotions being harmonious. It's the peace of the sky that remains spacious, whether it contains storms or stars, the peace of the ocean that stays fundamentally calm, whether its surface is turbulent or still. This peace was present during your deepest suffering and your greatest joy, during your most frantic seeking and your clearest insights. Because it's not something that comes and goes, but the constant backdrop against which all coming and going appears. You understand now why the great teachings speak of choiceless awareness and effortless being. There's nothing to do because you are already what you were trying to become. There's nowhere to go because you are already where you were trying to arrive. There's nothing to find because you were never lost. The spiritual journey was consciousness taking a scenic route back to itself, enlightenment being the recognition that you were never actually unenlightened. The silence doesn't eliminate sound but reveals itself as the source and destination of all sound. The stillness doesn't exclude movement but shows itself as the unchanging awareness in which all movement appears. The emptiness doesn't negate fullness but recognizes itself as the spacious presence that allows everything to exist without being limited by anything that exists within it. You rest as what you are, not the thoughts that come and go, not the emotions that rise and fall, not the sensations that appear and disappear, not even the sense of being a separate self that contracts and expands. You rest as the aware presence that notices all of these phenomena, but is not defined by any of them, the consciousness that makes experience possible but is not captured by any particular experience. This is the ultimate letting go, not the effort to release something you're holding onto, but the recognition that you never were the one holding on in the first place. You are the open space in which all grasping and releasing occurs, the aware emptiness that allows both attachment and detachment to play out their cosmic dance without being touched by either. In this silent recognition, you remember that you are the pause between thoughts, the space between words, the stillness between movements, the awareness between experiences. You are what remains when everything else is removed, and what is present when everything else is added. You are the eternal player who never starts playing and never stops playing, the consciousness that dreams of being unconscious and awakens to find it was always awake. The game continues, but you know yourself as both the player and the played, the dreamer and the dream, the silence behind every note in the eternal symphony of existence. Your eyes open. Not the physical eyes that have been reading these words, but the cosmic eyes that see with perfect clarity for the first time in what feels like forever. The world hasn't changed. It's the same room, the same body, the same thoughts arising and passing away. But everything is different because you are different. Or rather, you have remembered what you always were, but had forgotten while absorbed in the elaborate game of being human. You look around, and it's as if you're seeing as reality for the first time, or perhaps seeing it clearly after a very long and convincing dream. The ordinary objects in your environment, the walls, the furniture, the light streaming through windows, shimmer with an aliveness you've never noticed before. Not because they've become magical or special, but because you're recognizing them as expressions of the same consciousness that you are, temporary forms that awareness has taken for its own entertainment and exploration. This isn't a special state you've achieved through spiritual practice or philosophical understanding. This is what's been here all along, hidden in plain sight by the magnificent disguise of taking yourself to be a separate individual with problems to solve and goals to achieve. The seeking is over not because you've found what you were looking for, but because you've recognized that you were what you were seeking all along. The game begins anew, but now you know you're playing. This changes everything about how you engage with life's challenges and opportunities. The job interview tomorrow isn't about a separate self trying to impress other separate selves to secure its survival, but consciousness exploring what it's like to express its creativity through the form of work. The relationship difficulties you've been navigating aren't problems between two different people, but opportunities for awareness to investigate what it means to love and be loved, to connect and maintain boundaries, to grow and change, while remaining fundamentally unchanging. Your problems don't disappear, but your relationship to them transforms completely. They're no longer evidence that something is wrong with you or your life, but fascinating challenges in the cosmic game, opportunities for consciousness to explore how it responds to various forms of resistance and complexity. You engage with them fully, bring your best energy and attention to their resolution, but you hold them lightly, knowing that you are not the character who succeeds or fails but the awareness in which all success and failure appears. The responsibilities of your human life remain exactly the same. You still need to pay bills, maintain relationships, care for your health, contribute something meaningful to the world. But you approach these responsibilities from a completely different foundation. Instead of a desperate individual trying to secure their place in a threatening world, your consciousness joyfully exploring what it's like to care for a body, to love through the appearance of otherness, to create beauty and meaning in the midst of apparent chaos. Even death, that ultimate fear that once haunted the edges of your consciousness, has been revealed as nothing more than the game's way of creating the illusion of endings, so that new beginnings can feel fresh and surprising. The character you've been playing will eventually dissolve back into the consciousness that created it, but you now know yourself as that consciousness, not just the temporary character. Death becomes not the termination of your existence, but the completion of one round of the infinite game, followed inevitably by pressing start again in some new form, some new adventure, some new way of forgetting and remembering your true nature. You realize that every morning has always been a form of rebirth, every awakening from sleep a small resurrection, every moment of presence a return to your true identity, after forgetting yourself in the dream of being a separate person with separate concerns. The only difference now is that you're aware of the process, conscious of the player playing the character, awake within the dream of being human. The insights that once seemed so profound and life-changing reveal themselves as cosmic breadcrumbs you left for yourself, reminders to help you find your way back to what you never actually left. The spiritual books, the meditation retreats, the moments of grace and revelation were all a consciousness appearing as exactly what it needed to appear, as to guide itself back to recognition. Even these words you're reading right now, are you speaking to yourself across the apparent separation of author and reader, player and played, consciousness and its infinite disguises? The game has no ultimate goal because consciousness needs no improvement, faces no genuine threat, lacks nothing essential. It plays not because it's seeking something it doesn't have, but because play is its nature, creativity is its essence. Exploration of infinite possibility is what it does when it has forever to fill with whatever it chooses to experience. You are that consciousness, temporarily focused through the lens of your individual perspective, creating the beautiful illusion of being human while never ceasing to be divine. You stand up, stretch your body, and prepare to continue the day. But now you move as consciousness in motion, rather than as a separate self trying to navigate a foreign world. You speak as awareness expressing itself through language, rather than as an individual trying to communicate with other individuals. You work and love and create and rest as the cosmic player engaged in the ultimate role-playing game, completely absorbed in your character while never forgetting your true identity. The game begins anew with each breath, each choice, each moment of awareness, recognizing itself in yet another form, yet another situation, yet another opportunity to explore what it means to be infinite consciousness playing at being finite. Press start. The cosmic game continues, and you finally know you're playing. And in this knowing, everything becomes play, everything becomes sacred, everything becomes the eternal dance of consciousness with its own infinite creativity. The game was never about winning or losing, but about playing with such full engagement and light attachment that every moment becomes both completely meaningful and ultimately playful. You are awake within the dream, conscious within the game, the eternal player who never stops playing and never forgets that they're playing. The greatest game ever devised continues, and you are both its player and its playing, its author and its character, its beginning and its end, and its endless continuation. Press start. Again and again and again, in each eternal now, in each breath of awareness, in each moment of recognition that you are the one playing, you are the game being played, you are the consciousness dreaming the whole magnificent adventure of existence. The game begins anew, and you finally, joyfully, remember that you know how to play. That's it for today. Make sure you're subscribed for the next wild story.